Well, welcome everybody. So we always ask that our candidates put their status in their name so we know who are the students and who are the liaisons, and where you are, whether you've taken your exam or whether you've declared or whether you're getting ready to submit your technical images. Hi, Deb, welcome back. And Eva from Hungary.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hey, everyone.
Nice to see you again, Deb. So as you may have seen, today's topic is going to be vocabulary. It's near and dear to my heart. I believe that unless you know the language, you can't really communicate properly. And that's especially true in the exam. So they're going to use words. And if you don't know what they mean, you might know what it is, but you might not be able to understand to give the right answer. So that's today's goal, just to do a vocabulary review. And I'm going to make it interactive. So I'm going to call on people with a word and you're going to explain what it is the best you can. And
Okay.
if you don't get it right to the satisfaction of the jury, then members of the liaison team will explain. So that way everyone gets a shot. And it's 9:04. So first of all, does anyone actually have any burning questions that they brought today which are not vocabulary oriented? So we'll make sure we get those out of the way. Anyone have a difficulty or an issue that they wanted to bring up? Okay, well, I've got one. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I said I don't right now.
Okay, so I've got one. So I have a local candidate in my PPA affiliate, and she just ordered her blick kit. And she's a very detailed person, but she only got one sheet of paper. And that came creased, which was, just a shipping issue. But the reason why was that in the ordering, it lists what is required. Everything is 1 except the paper, which is 3. And in fact, I might even have the pictures here. So her issue was that she didn't order the required number of items because she thought that the 3 items would be 1 order. So I'm just going to show you. So has anybody, is anybody ordering their kit yet?
I ordered mine and received it. I've got to check the quantity of paper, but I believe I got 3.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I ordered mine and I never opened it yet. So I guess I need to check that.
Yeah, so you need 3 pieces of paper because they lay out to make a background. And just so that you know, when we see the example images, you can see the joins between the paper. And that's an important thing to make sure it looks like that. You're not trying to hide the joins. You're trying to make sure that they know that you used 3 sheets of paper and not a roll or whatever else. Here we go. So I'm going to share my screen. That's my Zoom. So thank you very much. So can you see my screen now with the blick?
Yes.
Okay, great. And you'll see it says required 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make sure that you put a 3 here.
Ah.
So that's how it comes up. When you click on the link in the PPA Certified Professional Photographer web page, it will show you how you click on the blick U to get the list of items, and that's what it comes up. So it doesn't make a cart, but it shows you what you need, and then you'll need to buy all of those things, including 3. My candidate just put a 1 in there thinking that it would be 3 sheets, but actually she only got 1 sheet. So you have to make sure that that's a 3. Okay, and stop sharing. You can see all your faces. Hi, Catherine. So welcome. So at our study break, we asked that the candidates put what stage they are in their name. So if you have declared or if you've taken your exam, if you can put that, rename yourself so that everybody knows where you are in your process, that would be great. And so it looks like we have Mark and Donna, welcome, and Eva
Thank
from
you.
Hungary, Catherine, and Deb. So you're the contestants, and everybody else is the judge and jury. So today's topic is vocabulary, and Catherine, unless you have any specific questions why you came today, which you can ask now, we'll get on with the vocabulary part of the test. Nope. Okay, great. So the first word that we want to define today, and this is for Deb, is bite, B-Y-T-E.
I know that.
You're asking me the,
Right, so what is a bite? If you, and you can use it in a sentence if you like.
oh,
But it's
okay.
written, what is it?
A bite is, oh man, I know and I don't know how to explain it. Let me see. It takes, like a megabyte.
Dog bite? No.
Well, a bite is, oh gosh. I don't know how to explain it. I know what it is. It's,
Okay. That's
8
okay.
bits to a byte.
Oh, sorry, could you say that again, Donna, please?
8 bits to a byte.
Right, so it's a unit of measurement of what?
Well, for printers, you have to have 8 bits or 1 byte. I don't know.
So it's a unit of measurement of digital data.
Yes, it's 0. Yeah, and yeah.
8 bits to a byte. And Deb, you're right that we measure our image size in megabytes, maybe gigabytes. Next question is, this one is for Eva. What is aliasing? You'll have to unmute when you reply. So the question is, what is aliasing?
Aliasing.
Aliasing. A-L-I-A-S-I-N-G.
So an alias is like an avatar, is a double person, a second personality maybe. But
So that's
this
a great
is alias.
example.
This is alias, yeah, alias,
So
yeah.
the meaning of the word alias, you're right, is an alternative name or
Person, yeah.
representation, but that's not what aliasing is. So we'll go to Catherine. Catherine, could you define what the aliasing is?
Is that when you're making one thing something else on your computer?
A little bit, but not really. So if you were to look, actually, we'll get somebody else. Which of the jury wants to describe aliasing? I'll have to pick if you don't volunteer. Okay, we'll go with Chuck. Hi, Chuck.
Line, I'm trying to focus in on my screen. Aliasing. It basically how your computer is going to display things along the edges, whether it's smooth or jagged.
That's right. So if we were to draw individual pixels at very, very low resolution, we would see them as squares on the screen. And a white line would appear to be a staircase of steps between black and white. And if we want to create smooth lines on our screen, we can use another word, which is interpolate between the black and white and create shades of gray. And then the line starts to look smooth. And especially as you have higher and higher resolution, those jagged lines actually are invisible. They just look like an invisible boundary between black and white that is smooth. So the time when we might see aliasing is if we don't have enough resolution in our image that we've taken, or we're displaying it at very high magnification, so we can see the boundaries between objects. Sometimes when I look to see whether I've got sharp focus, I'll zoom way in, and if I can see aliasing, I know I've got sharp focus. If I can't see it, that means I've probably got blurry boundaries between black and white, and I didn't really have sharp focus. So I like aliasing when I'm zoomed in, but I don't like to see aliasing in my final images, either on the screen or in print. Okay, next question is for Mark. Could you describe ambient light?
That would be the natural light you see during the day coming in through the window if you're in the studio. I'm trying to think if ambient light would also be artificial light. So I would
Does it need to be during the day?
Ambient, that's what I'm trying to determine. Can I have ambient light in my garage for my garage lighting? I would call that yes. So ambient, as opposed, the opposite of ambient would be strobe, which is very short duration. So continuous lighting.
Right, so as photographers, we often add light. So we'll use continuous lights or strobes or speed lights, flash guns, whatever it might be. That's when we add light to the scene. If we don't add any light, the light that's there is the ambient light. So ambient is the, I'll say naturally occurring light, but it's basically the light that is in our scene before we might add light or even take it away as a photographer in our light.
Is it the artificial light?
Yes, we often add artificial light. I guess we could add natural light, but we really add artificial light. But the light that's there could already be artificial. We could have a street scene and the street lights are considered ambient light. And then we might use a flash so that we light up the subject. That's not ambient light. So it's the light that you can't take away, really, the light in the background of your scene. So I can see, for instance, in Mark's case, he's probably got a window because he's got a bright side of his face. That's ambient light. So if we don't want to get too far, but if we wanted to create a better photograph, we might fill in the dark side of his face and darken down the light side of his face to get a more pleasant exposure, like Mia's picture, her portrait there. Okay, next question. I'm looking for a hard one here. Aspect ratio. So Donna, could you describe aspect ratio?
That's the light from, that's like 1 to 1 or 4 to 1 or 3 to 1, where it's, I don't know how to explain it.
Well, normally we would say there's no wrong answers, but in this time, in this case, all of these have answers that could be wrong. So I asked about aspect ratio, and what you were describing was lighting ratio. So for instance, again, if we use Mark's image on the screen right now, Catherine, what will be the lighting ratio of Mark's face currently? What's your guess?
Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
1 to 2. Oh.
Any other guesses? Deb, what would you guess would be the lighting ratio on Mark's face? Go ahead, Donna.
4 to 1 or 3 to 1.
Any other guesses?
I'd guess 4 to 1.
Yeah, I guess maybe even higher. It's almost blown out on one side and half intensity on the other. So it's hard to judge. Now, if we were to look at James, for instance, he's maybe 2 to 1, right? These are lighting ratios, and they're an important thing to know. But we're actually asking about aspect ratios. So so Catherine.
The ratio from vertical to horizontal of a photograph.
That's right. And where does that occur? Give us an example of where we would see an aspect ratio.
Like a square versus, like our sensors are 2 to 3.
Exactly right. So we've got an aspect ratio of our original image, and then we've got an aspect ratio which we might use for a print. So what's the aspect ratio of the most commonly printed and framed size?
Me? Oh, what did I just say, 2 to 3? So if that's 8 by 10, then 8. Yeah, 8 by 10, so 4 to 5.
Right. So actually the aspect ratio of the sensor and the images we take doesn't match the aspect ratio that we print. So what's the word that we use to what we do in order to print for an 8 by 10? We have to do something to the image to
Crop it,
yeah, crop it, right? More words, great.
or words.
It's all about words today. So Deb, can you tell me what barn doors are in photography?
Say that again,
Barn
John. I didn't
doors?
hear you.
Yeah, this
Oh.
question's for Deb for 10 points. Can you tell me what barn doors are in photography?
Barn doors, does it block, it helps block the light?
That's right. So if we were to use one item that was opaque or black, what would that be called? Not attached to a light.
Say that one more time, John.
Yeah, if I had a card like this, don't forget that it's gray, but I put it to block the light. I'm blocking the light at the moment. Not blocking the light, blocking the light. So what would that be called? If I was to use that, what would it be called? An independently positionable, opaque piece of material that blocks light. What would that be called? Which is changing my lighting ratio, just as a by the way. Nobody? Okay, we'll ask Ron.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can, Deb. So
Okay, I think I'm losing my earpiece. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, can you say that again?
We're looking for the name of an independently movable piece of material that's opaque, used to block light, like I'm doing now.
Is it a gobo?
No. Next.
No.
Well,
Flag?
maybe, but they would be more specific.
A flag?
A flag, right. So what a flag is exactly right. We use a flag when we want to block light from a direction so that we can take away light or subtract light from our image rather than add it. So what would we describe barn doors to be?
I guess San Diego and the Bills are basically carried us themselves in that series with us, San Diego.
Okay.
Kenneth, if you're talking to us, it's a little bit garbled. So just say something if you were intending to answer the question.
You have to unmute your mic. I muted him.
Oh, okay.
Let's see if I can.
Okay, we'll come back to Kenneth. So thank you, Kenneth, and please do, I'll call on you for the next question. But so we're looking for what is the definition of barn doors, and they're like a flag, but not quite. There's an important difference.
Sure.
Okay, we'll go to Mark.
They're attached to the light and
Right, barn doors are something that's
typically on a
attached to
ring.
or the reflector. And I'm so sorry I interrupted. Please finish.
All good.
A Bondor is a device that sits right on the light and can be manipulated or moved inward or out to give a sharp, a much sharper edge to an area. You can actually just light the face and then cut it off on the body to darken the body.
That's right. So one barn doors are attached to the light or attached to the reflector, and then normally movable like this. You can have 2 or 4, I guess maybe 1, 2, 3 or 4, but they're attached to the light. So the flag was something which isn't attached to the light that can be used to block light. And the barn doors are very nice because you can cut down the aperture of the light and make it very directional so that you can get light on one side of the face and not the other, for instance. So that kind of thing. And you sounded perfectly clear then, Kenneth. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is for Catherine. What is barrel distortion?
It has to do with your lens, and depending on depending on the length of the lens, I think a shorter lens would have more barrel distortion.
So let's define it as the effect at the sensor. So what would barrel distortion look like?
The effect at the sensor?
Yeah, so it is created by the lens, you're right. Yeah, that's kind of only the first part of the answer. The most important part is, what does barrel distortion look like after the light has been through the lens on your sensor? How would you recognize it in an image?
More of a fisheye look, or?
Yeah, so if I look really close, you're going to see some kind of distortion where my face has kind of gone like, it's kind of bulged out.
Yeah.
Okay, so and what's the, so
whatever's
that
closest is largest, and everything else looks small behind it.
yeah, so closer objects look larger and distant objects look smaller, and that results in a kind of almost a spherical distortion, and that's why it's called a barrel, because a barrel is like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's the opposite of barrel distortion? And we'll go to Mark for that.
Pincushion distortion. So
Okay,
it would go in at the middle and the edges are out.
Right. So a pincushion, normally the corners are further out than the middle of each side of the cushion. So we see this kind of distortion. So barrel distortion is like that, and pincushion is the opposite. I can't do it very well with my hands, but anyway. Yeah, thank you, James. James was doing it very well. Okay, next for Deb. So how would we define broad lighting? How would we create broad lighting?
Broad lighting is it's you can create broad light with one light, right?
Yes.
And where the light is positioned right in front of the subject.
So broad lighting, let's give you a start. I'm going to turn my head 45 degrees, so my nose is pointing 45 degrees, not at the camera, but 45 degrees away from the camera.
Okay.
Right. So let's just say, for our definitions, the subject is pointing their face 45 degrees away from the camera.
So the larger side of the face that is lit is considered broad lighting.
That's good. So Donna, what is short lighting?
Short lighting is when you want to narrow someone's face. It would brush across the front of the face. Is that correct?
Kind of, but we're missing the key. So here's an example of broad lighting. If you look at my face right now, the light is on this side, okay, and it's illuminating the large portion of my face, right? The broad part of my face, the narrow part of my face, the short side is not being illuminated.
Right.
And if I do this, now the light is illuminating the short side, and this is darker. And you're right, we use short lighting if we want to have a narrower attention. So we've illuminated the short side of the face with the light, and that's where our attention is going to go, and it makes people look thinner. And if we illuminate the broad side of the face, we've got a lot more of the subject illuminated, and that can make me look fatter. So the rule, and you'll pardon me, Eva, this might not translate, but it's from American movies. So you wouldn't broad light abroad, right? So ladies generally don't like to have a large part of their face lit because it makes their face look rounder, and they prefer the slender look. What is butterfly lighting? And we'll go for Mark on that one.
Butterfly lighting is typically the light is centered on the face, straight on and above, and produces a butterfly under the nose.
That's right. We look for the little butterfly right underneath here. The little, it's the shadow that makes two wings and a little bug. That's butterfly lighting. Well done. The next question, I don't know what it is, but it's for Eva. And well, this is a tough one. What is chromatic aberration?
No idea.
Okay, well, I have to say that if I was Hungarian and English was not my first language, chromatic aberration would be a pretty tough question. So we'll open that up to, we'll go for hands on this one. Okay, Mark put his hand up. Let's go, Mark.
It's a lens error or lens imperfection where one color of light focuses at one point and another color of light focuses at another. So you get around bright edges, you get a banding of various colors, purple, green, magenta.
Exactly. So just to break down the words, Eva. So chromatic, chroma, that's the word for color. I forget whether it's Greek or Latin, but anyway, obviously that's color. And aberration is something which is like a distortion.
I understand aberration. Aberration is a failure, basically. No, it
could be considered a failure. It's some distance away from the normal.
From the normal, yeah.
Right. And so chromatic aberration.
This is a lens. It's a bad lens. So it's a lens that cannot be repaired or something like this, or what?
That's right. A perfect lens would be 100% achromatic. So light reflected in, light coming in on one side, all of the wavelengths are refracted equally. So uncorrected lenses, the wavelengths start to split because they travel at different speeds through the medium, whether it's glass or plastic or air or whatever. And so some of them get bent at different angles. And by the time they get focused back onto the sensor, they haven't been corrected. So the red parts are on one side and the blue parts are on another side. And you get fringing. And as Mark said, we often get fringing. It's correctable in post-processing because it can look for that kind of fringe and correct for it, or maybe it's correctable in the lens profile in your camera. But it's best not to have to. So more expensive lenses are designed to correct for close to perfect chromatic aberration. Very good. So that actually is something which I use when I'm answering tests, which is if I don't quite know, I look at the words to see if I can understand where they were made and what they might mean, so that I can better understand a new word. And I'm not just talking to Eva here because some of these words are historical. Still on the aspect of color, who can describe what a color space is? Nope. Okay, so can someone tell me?
Kenneth has his hand up. Kenneth has his hand up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
Color space would be a solid color in an area surrounded by the object. No? Okay.
I'm struggling to overlap that one with the answer that I'm looking for.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, a color space is a three-dimensional representation of colors.
Okay.
So we might do that with red, green, and blue. So we can have all of the possible colors in a three-dimensional color space. Right. And then the red colors will be in one corner and the blue in another, etc.
Okay. Okay. So it's a rainbow effect across the screen kind of thing.
Well, that would a rainbow is a spectrum in one dimension, actually.
But you could have red in one corner and yellow in the other and blend over between the two.
So the color spaces that you might be asked about are Adobe RGB and sRGB.
RGB, sRGB, that kind of thing.
These are color spaces which contain all of the colors that device can manage to represent. We have a color profile which describes or can correct our
Yeah,
colors.
I understand. I was a custom color printer, so I know now what you're talking about.
So for everybody, the RGB is a color space, and sRGB is typically used for display on computer monitors. Adobe RGB is a color space which has more colors that it can represent truthfully. Does anyone know the color space which has the maximum range of colors? We use it in Photoshop.
It'll be
Photo.
PSD.
No, but we'll come back to that. So if somebody else had an answer.
Isn't there Pro Photo?
Photo.
Or maybe I'm saying it wrong.
Right, so Adobe products, Photoshop especially, uses the maximum range of colors. And you know, I'm blanking on the word. Somebody else help me here.
ProPhoto.
Yeah, ProPhoto RGB. That's like the super maximum range of colors that could exist. And then inside that, there's Adobe RGB, and you can have a profile for your camera, which supports Adobe RGB. And if the profile comes out of your camera and into your software and onto your screen, and your screen can display Adobe RGB, you're going to see the most colors pretty much that you can see on the screen. And then you can send that to your printer and say, this image has an Adobe RGB color space, and they'll know how to print it. So there's another color space which printers use. So can somebody tell me that, Eva? What is the color space that printers actually use to get ink on their paper?
CMYK.
Yeah, that was Catherine, but yep, you beat it to the punch. CYMK, what does that stand for, Deb?
CYMK is
cyan, yellow. Cyan, yellow, magenta, C.
And what's the K stand for?
Black.
Yeah, I was gonna say black.
So what if, black doesn't start with a K, it ends with a K.
Right.
So what does the K stand for as a word?
Calvin? Calvin?
No.
no.
Black.
It's key, K-E-Y.
Key.
Oh.
That's the key color when you print, and then you add cyan, magenta, and yellow, the line up on the key. But it is always black. Okay, next question is, this is for Eva. Can you describe depth of field?
Yeah, depth of field is the area where the picture is in focus.
Yeah, we say acceptably sharp.
Acceptably sharp, yeah.
Right, the focal point is where we've got the maximum sharpness, but we have an area where we call it acceptably sharp. This will be very important in your technical image evaluation, because when you look at the sample images of Sherman, you'll see that he's not in focus all the way down his body in the one of the technical images where we're viewing from the top, and we have to get him acceptably sharp, and that won't be in perfect sharpness. So the focal point gives us the best sharpness, and hopefully that's perfect, but the depth of field will have a range where it's acceptably sharp, and that's a kind of a judgment call. And sometimes you don't want perfect sharpness. If you have a portrait of a woman, they might like a bit defocused, because it de-emphasizes any wrinkles and other characteristics that they don't like to see. So sometimes we don't want perfect sharpness everywhere. But in your technical image evaluation, we used, or in the description, the goals, you have to have acceptably sharp. And that's so your depth of field has to be in the range of Sherman, which is described in the.
Hey, John.
Yes.
I've heard you describing it in terms of range and area and stuff like that, but what is the physical measure that you're looking at?
It's distance from the camera.
There you go. Yeah.
Also, back in film days, there was a thing called hyperfocal distance.
Yeah, that's another word. So I didn't call it up yet, but I'm going to ask somebody other than Ken to explain the word hyperfocal,
hyperfocal distance focusing. Yeah.
Hyperfocal distance. So somebody other than Ken. And you can tell us if they get it right, if you think they get it right.
Yeah, we discussed this with Ron today, so I am quite up to date on this. And this
Okay,
is
so you shouldn't be the one to answer, but you can give us your definition after. This is for people that are unsure, and that's really the whole point of this. If any of the words that come up, you think, oh, I'm a little bit fuzzy on that, that's a win, because we want to make sure that you get a better understanding of using that word. So we'll go to Catherine for hyperfocal distance. You're muted, I'm afraid. I can't hear. There we
Doesn't
go.
it have something to do with the acceptable focus distance? Like if you're taking a picture of a building and there's letters on the building and you want that to be in focus, you have to figure out how to keep things in the foreground in focus as well.
No, well, kind of. Let's look for another definition from Donna.
So I've got it in front of me. The distance to the nearest plane of depth field when the lens is in focused on infinity.
So we'll go to Mark, and reading out the definitions from the screen is not allowed in this competition.
Yeah, I don't exactly know this term, so I'm learning, but I believe it's got to do with the distance that you're set on focus, where using the aperture, typically stopping down, infinity is at focus, and something in front of the focal selection is in focus also. So I know it's in there somewhere.
That was actually very good. So we'll go back to Ken and ask him if he wants to tune that any further.
Okay, well, for hyperfocal distance, it changes with the f-stop of the lens. So if you're f2.8, you have almost no hyperfocal distance. But if you're at f16, you can take that f16 and put it on the mark or where the closest item is that will be in focus in your stuff. And so you've got everything from, say, 8 feet to infinity in focus.
Right, so the hyperfocal distance is the focus point, the distance away from the camera. If you focus at that point, then everything to infinity and everything in front of your camera will be in focus. And it's a great way if you want to take the landscape and you want the pretty flowers in focus and you want the sunset in focus, then knowing your hyperfocal distance means that you don't need to adjust focus. You can set it to a particular distance, set your focus point to a particular distance. And for that aperture, you'll know that everything in front and behind that point will be acceptably sharp. And again, acceptably sharp is the key. I do that a lot with astrophotography, and it's really hard to make sure the stars are in focus as well as things that are close, because they start to get a little bit fuzzy. They might be acceptably sharp, but they're not acceptably sharp. And so sometimes I take 2 exposures, one focused on infinity and one focused on my focal distance to give me the best when I blend them together.
I have some old Canon FD lenses, and they actually have hyperfocal distance lines marked on it so that you can set an f-stop and then move the lens focus to that point, and then you automatically have your hyperfocal distance.
That's great. Now you have to calculate it on your iPhone.
I was gonna ask that, John. Is there a formula that we use to calculate that? I kind of remember something on the exam where we needed to use a formula.
Yes, so they're not going to ask you how you calculate hyperfocal distance,
okay.
I think. But I'm going to ask Ron if you could put that in the chat, if you could look up the hyperfocal distances, probably in London, but I don't want to distract by looking it up now.
Well, what I'll do, in fact, I just sent it over to Ava this morning. There's several apps out there on your phone and online that you can use to punch in your f-stops and everything, and it will tell you what your hyperfocal distance is. And so I'll just put that hyperlink in the chat.
So the apps are nice because they'll do it for you, but what I was looking for is how the calculation is made. So if you have a reference, if you can find that in London, that would be great. Next question is for Catherine, and it's, what does DPI mean?
I'll find it for you.
Thank you, Mia. So the question is for Catherine, what does DPI mean?
Dots per inch.
Okay, and where would I use it?
When you're exporting a file, you might want to define what your dots per inch are.
You only need to use it in one particular case. So can you be more specific? You can put DPI in your images when you export them. That's absolutely right. But in some cases, it's completely irrelevant, which we'll get into in a moment. But what is the case where it's relevant, DPI?
In printing?
Exactly right. Dots per inch means it's a physical thing. So it's physical in terms of paper or whatever you've printed on. And that gives you an indication of what?
Clarity, or just how clear it looks.
So if it's more clear,
Detail.
There's more dots per inch.
if it's more clear or more detailed, is the DPI bigger or smaller?
Bigger for better detail.
Right. So, and of course that depends on viewing distance as well. So sometimes very high DPI doesn't matter when you're standing 10 feet away. So what's the other thing like DPI, sounds like DPI, but not quite, and is not related to printing?
PPI.
PPI. So Mark, could you tell us about PPI?
Pixels per inch.
And where do I use that?
In resolution settings for exporting, for measuring or exporting digital files.
So PPI is related, if DPI is related to printing, what is the equivalent?
Probably on screen resolution.
Right. So with DPI, we've got dots per inch on the paper, and with PPI, we have pixels per inch on the screen. So the pixels per inch on your phone, on your iPad, on your computer monitor is another indication of the clarity that you're going to get, the detail, the potential detail that the device can show. Of course, you can show a low resolution on your screen with high PPI, but it will show aliasing, right? Because you're blowing something up, something of low resolution up so big, even though you've got a very high resolution screen, you'll be able to see the defects more. And Mia has a comment.
Electronic monitors also talk about nits.
Yeah, right. So I'm not sure that nits will come up, but let's go for it. Who knows what nits are? Nits on your screen, not nats, nits, N-I-T.
Never heard of that one.
It's the individual red, green, and blue LEDs that cover the entire screen.
But it relates to a property of those LEDs. What property? If I was buying a monitor, would I want big, high nits or low nits?
High nits.
Because it will be able to be the screen. I can make my screen something
larger.
No.
No.
Brighter. So nits are a measure of screen brightness. And
okay.
So surely those LED pixels, the red, green, blue LED pixels in the screen that are able to produce more light, more red photons, so our screen appears brighter, they have more power and more nits. So Mia, what were you going to say about PPI?
On the focal distance, it is in chapter 3 of the Upton and London book. There are several pages that cover it and examples. And I will look at the Steve Kozak and tell you what pages those are.
That's great. And if you could put those in the chat, then
I'm trying to figure out how to do that because mine is
just the page numbers.
Okay.
Would be good, and then we can use that as a reference. So everybody, the suggested reading that PPA has for the CPP exam is listed on the exam portion of the PPA website, and the suggested reading list, there's like 8 or 9 different references. One of them is the London book, and I'm not sure, Catherine, do you have a reference currently? Do you have an actual book? No. Okay, so the London book is pretty good, and it's only $25 for the digital version. And so somebody else is going to find the link for you and put it in the chat because it's one of the main references that is used when we take the sample test, the 50 question sample test, one of our liaisons looked at all the different references, because when you get an answer right or wrong at the end of the test, it shows you where that question came from. And nearly 2/3 of the questions were referring back to the London Upton Stone photography book. So we feel that's a good reference, and at $25, it's a bargain. So they'll put that link in the chat for you. So next, thank you very much, Mia. So next question is an easy one. What does DSLR mean? And we'll go to Eva. DSLR. Oh, you're muted, Eva.
Used to know it, but now it doesn't come to my mind.
Okay,
I'm sure
Catherine
the
knows. So we're not...
DSLR is the digital. The SLR is so the DSLR.
So Catherine knows, and so does Ken. So that means we're going to ask Deb. What does DSLR mean?
Oh gosh.
Digital single lens, and the R is something.
What is the R, Catherine?
Reflex.
Reflex, right. And what does it have to do with? What is the single lens reflex idea?
The shutter. Oh, sorry. Am I supposed to answer that?
No, yes, please go ahead.
Oh.
But it's not shutter.
The lens, there's just one lens, right? Single lens reflex. And I thought the reflex was the way it reflects through, and it's one. Yeah,
but that's not related to the shutter, which is the shutter used for exposure. Ken, do you want to explain two things actually? So we'll make this question into two. Hold on, we'll make the question into two parts. We have D for digital, SLR, and so we're going to look at the next generation, which was the previous generation actually is SLR, and then we'll look at mirrorless, so that we know the difference of those three. So Ken, can you take us from SLR to DSLR to mirrorless?
Yes. First of all, the first cameras that came out were twin lens reflexes, where your eye and the film use two separate lenses.
Right.
Okay.
I've got a viewfinder and I've got the lens which exposes the film.
Right. And then SLR is single lens reflex, and there was a mirror inside the camera that flips up to expose your film that was in the camera. And so you had both a shutter and a mirror that would flip up and down.
That's great. Hold on just a second. So that means that single lens reflex cameras will direct the light from your eye when you're focusing through the lens. And then when you're exposing, the mirror will mean that the light goes through the lens to the film or to the sensor. So SLR means single lens reflex. It will go through the lens to the detector. And in the case of digital, that's no longer film, that's digital. So we know now SLR and DSLR. And take us to mirrorless. What's different about mirrorless?
Okay, mirrorless has no mirror in the body, and so they can make the body much thinner, the lens is wider, and it's easier to make the more accurate lens. And so you go from the lens directly to the shutter, and then you have an electronic viewfinder both for your eye and for the back of the camera.
Right, so the viewfinder is now showing what the sensor is looking at. And that's because there is no mirror that needs to deflect. And because it's an electronic viewfinder, there is no, there's actually a lot of optics in the viewfinder, but it's not optics which is taking the image from through the lens to the viewfinder. The image is, the light goes through the lens, is imaged onto the sensor, and that sensor image is then electronically sent to the viewfinder.
And for anyone, mirrorless is where all of the manufacturing companies are going.
Okay, so our next question is for Mark, and the question is, what is dynamic range?
Dynamic range is how much difference in exposure a certain file can handle. So how bright it can get without clipping and how dark it can get without clipping.
So dynamic range can be applied to the scene, and it can also be applied to the image that you've collected.
Yeah.
So dynamic range is the difference between what?
The lightest and darkest values.
Right. So that basically the darkest thing in the image that we want to have detail in and the lightest thing, we need to make sure, or we do try and make sure that the maximum dynamic range is transferred onto the sensor. So we use the controls that we have for exposure to.
And it's expressed in stops, I believe.
Yeah. So
the dynamic range of printing, as in you go to, say, a color paper image, newspaper image, that dynamic range is only 0 through 9, with detail being picked up in 3 and 7. 0 is all black and 9 is all white. Now the dynamic range on your screen and in your camera is probably 5 to 6 times more than what it is on a print.
We'll stop there on the dynamic range and we'll move to the histogram. So what do we see in a histogram? What is the typically the leftmost bin on a histogram? What does that show? When we look on the back of our camera, or we look in Lightroom, or we look in Photoshop at the histogram, what is represented by the leftmost bin in the histogram? And that one's for Catherine.
Light, or no doubt, no, it's blacks. On the left.
What does it represent as a digital value?
Pixels.
So there's 2 dimensions here. One is what actual number does it show us? And the other is what is the height of the bin in the histogram? What is the height? What does the height represent? What is the scale of the left
quantity?
Side? Quantity, yeah. Frequency. So it's actually a frequency distribution. We have the height proportional to the number of times that pixel that occurs in our image. So what's the brightest value in the image represented on our histogram typically?
The
far right.
We'll go for Mark on that one.
The brightest values on the histogram are the whites, the highlights.
Yes. What's the typical numerical value that we show?
Oh, 255.
Right. Is that the brightest value in our histogram in actual fact? Is it the brightest value in our image?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
So, no. So our image is, if our image was 8 bits per channel, that's one byte of information actually, and a red value might go up from 0 to 255. But the sensor is these days 10, 12, even a 14-bit sensor, which means 2 to the power of 14, which is way, way bigger than 256. It's like, I don't know, 32 billion or something like that. So we can actually have dark values of 0, but we can have bright values. A 10-bit image will be 1024, 11, 2048, 4096 for a 12-bit image, and on, and I forget the numbers anymore. But the brightest value can be much higher. We just scale it for the screen, and we scale it for the histogram into 0 to 255. So it's a convenient way to look. And when you're doing your technical image evaluation and they say, where are the highlights? They'll say the acceptable range of highlights is between 2 numbers, and they're on the 255 scale. So you'll use your little pen tool in Adobe Camera Raw or in Photoshop or Lightroom, and you can place the cursor over the highlights in your image, and it will show you a red, green, and blue readout value. And those values will show you on a scale of 0 to 255, just like your histogram does. But you should know that the actual image intensity values inside the image can be much bigger than that because the dynamic range is so much bigger. If an 8-bit dynamic range was your maximum, we wouldn't really have much contrast that we could show, but instead we get a 10 or 12 or 14-bit dynamic range in the image values. So that gives us much more opportunity, because we can do things like expose to the right, and we can boost our highlights, or we can decrease our highlights and get them back again by using the sliders in our post-processing software. But I'm getting off track. Next question is for Eva. What is environmental portraiture?
Environmental portraiture, when you do your pictures in the environment, so in nature. No?
Right. So natural, or somewhere where the subject lives in the conditions. So it's something. And what's the opposite of environmental portraiture, Catherine?
Indoor. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Well, my cat might live indoors, right? So its environment might naturally be indoors if I've got a house cat. The answer, actually Ken said it already, was studio. So that's where we're creating the environment in a studio with props and lighting, etc. So this one's for Mark. Can you describe what feathering is and how I might use it?
Feathering is a lighting technique where you would reduce, probably either turn the light to the edge of its illumination, lighting an object or a face, or use a flag or a goby to reduce lighting.
Yeah, so when we have a light that is in a modifier, or even not in a modifier, by angling the light away from the subject, we'll get less light, but especially if it's in a softbox or an umbrella or some other kind of modifier, we will be getting indirect light on the subject. If we turn it directly towards the subject, we're getting direct light, which will give us what kind of shadows, Deb?
I'm sorry, John, I was reading the chat. Say that one more time.
Whereas if we have our light source directed directly at the subject, what are the kind of shadows that we can expect? If our light source is directly focused on the subject. Okay, Catherine.
And a light, flat light?
Well, what kind of shadows are we likely to get when our light source is directed at the subject?
Like straight on?
Yes.
No shadows?
Yeah, that wasn't what I was going for. If we have
Very
shadows,
sharp.
what kind of sharp, right? Hard light or harder light with sharper shadows. And so as we turn the light away and we have more indirect light that's been bouncing around in the modifier, and some of it comes out in different directions, what kind of shadows can we expect?
So they're softer.
Right.
More transitional and softer.
So that's called feathering. Feathering is where we create, instead of direct light, we create a less directional light. And we can do that by generally turning the light source sideways or partly sideways, so that we get indirect light that's been bouncing around inside the modifier on the face of the subject. And Steve, please.
Sorry, no, I've got to go right now. I've got another meeting on the other side of the world. John, your presentation is superb. A great idea to have the vocabulary questions. I think we could do a whole show on this to promote the CPP program and the PPA. Brilliant idea. Really love what you're doing.
Okay. Well,
okay, I got to go.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve.
No, it's true. Okay, thanks.
Okay, next question is for Ken or Kenneth. Do you go by Ken or Kenneth, Ken?
Either one is fine.
Okay. So for Ken, the question is, what is a fill light?
Okay, a fill light, you have your main light that is the main body. Your fill light fills the shadows. And so like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, that fill light can control where the amount of shadow you're getting.
Okay, great. So what kinds of fill light could we create? Oh, sorry, not create. What kinds of fill light might be useful?
A window.
Okay,
can be a fill light.
Ken, you gave us the good answer. So the next part of the question is for somebody else, so we'll go for it. Eva, what kind of fill light would be possible or useful?
You can use an additional light source
Yes.
like a bulb or something like that. You can use a
If
reflector.
you hold on, if you had two lights and they were exactly the same brand, and you wanted to create shadows, what would you do with the power of the second light for the fill?
Could be less, like half of it or 1/3 of it or something like that.
Very good. So Catherine, what other kinds of fill light could we use?
A reflector.
Right. So what would that do?
Bounce the light.
Yeah, reflect
so
light.
if we didn't have an additional light source, an additional strobe or what have you, the reflector could be used to bounce the main light onto the
shadow
the darker side of the face in order to light it up. What other kind of fill light could we use?
An umbrella?
Well, that's a modifier, but what other kind of fill light could we use? Ambient light.
Ambient.
Right. So it would be the naturally occurring light in the scene. We might light one side to get features and detail, but leave the other side to be lit with the natural light. And actually, we often do that when we have two different subjects. We might have a main subject who's in shadow, and then we might have a background, which is ambient light, and we would light the subject with our flash to light them up, and then the ambient light will be the rest of the exposure. Okay, next question is, we'll go to Catherine on this. Could you describe flat lighting, what it is, and how you might make it?
Flat lighting, something directly on someone.
Well, define what it is first.
Define flat lighting?
Yeah.
It's basically when there's no shadows. It's a very, very bright light sometimes on people's faces that like
so who likes flat lighting?
Who likes it?
Who likes it? You know, who would want flat lighting?
Peter Hurley? No, just for someone like me that's older, I might like it because it would fill in wrinkles and fill in flaws.
Well, I have to tell you, at this PPI, you don't have any wrinkles and you look young, but your lighting is kind of flat. So whatever it is, maybe it's a window you've got coming in and you're lit from all directions at the same time, and there are very little to no shadows. And so every wrinkle, every shape,
that's why there's no wrinkles, because they're flat lit.
Filled in. Right. So how can I make flat lighting intentionally? If I had to use artificial light, how would I make flat lighting? Deb, what would I do to create flat lighting?
You said if you had artificial light, I want
to create flat lighting with an artificial light. What kind of light source would I have, and where would I put it?
Directly in front of the subject, or turn the subject to the light.
Right. So if I'm the subject, direct, and I want actually, if Catherine was the subject, and if you wanted to make me look like Catherine, what would you do? I know it's an impossible task, but I mean, if you wanted my lighting to look like Catherine's lighting, what would you do?
Well, I would have to light you more, so I would have to add more light or turn you towards.
Where would you add it in my case?
In your case, I would add it to camera right, looks like. Yeah.
This side or this side?
Nope, this side, yes.
This side, right. Mm-hmm. And so what would that, I'll give you the answer, but basically we would create fill light that balanced the ambient light, and then we would have a ratio of 1:1, right? So that would be the equivalent of creating a flat light. But in the case of beginning from scratch to create flat light, I think Mia's going to tell us about that.
Well, I was going to say I have this amazingly large umbrella, and I use really nice diffusion cloth on it. And for my ladies that are, elderly, They often ask, they don't want this to show or that to show on their face because they've stressed too much and they don't like their crow's feet and they don't like this and they don't like their frown line. So I will put that light dead in front of them and it's just shining on them. And I won't do it really incredibly bright to start. I just ease it up until they have the soft appearance that they want, but it doesn't distract so much from their actual age. It just kind of minimizes the shadows in the folds. And then my second comment would be, John, that we are about 8 minutes over. For those who have to leave, I just wanted you to have an idea, sense of time.
Thanks so much. I looked about 15 minutes ago and I thought, so.
We're good. But yeah, that was something that's a technique that I use. And then I'll put, if I need some fill, I'll put it in there. But oftentimes these particular individuals don't want that. They're very happy with the way their folds do not have dark lines, you know.
So thank you so much for all that, Mia. So what I want you to take away from this session is that there are words, and you probably, some of them you have a fuzzy definition. And when those words come up in a question in the exam, you'll be given a multiple choice, and two of the answers you'll probably know. But if you're fuzzy, you might not get the right answer between those other two. So the way to do it is that you look through the glossary. There's flashcards on the PPA CPP exam portion in the materials that they provide you. There's a link to flashcards, and they have both the word and then the definition. And in the London book and many others, you'll have a glossary which basically lists out all the different words. And as you read through them, pay attention to the ones that you just don't know, or the ones that you're not sure, and read the definitions and understand them, because that will mean that when you're faced with that word in your test, you'll have a clear understanding or a better understanding of what it is, and a much better chance of knowing the answer. Even if you didn't know the answer to begin with, you can probably figure it out. But if you don't know the word, then tough. And I have sympathy with Eva for doing this in the second language, so very good for you. But
You already passed. I did it. I passed already.
oh, congratulations. Well, anyway, I have admiration for you for passing
Yeah,
those
it
exams
was
in the
not
second
easy.
language. But it wasn't easy, right? Yeah, okay.
There was a word which I didn't understand, and an English word which I didn't know how to translate. And then I wanted, then I asked the person who observed me remotely whether I can use a vocabulary, but it was not allowed. So
no, that's like somebody reading now and reading me the definition.
Yeah.
From this. So anyway, I think we're about done, because it isn't for us to teach you all these things. It's just to be a guide to help you know where to go and look and how to strengthen your own situation. And some people might know all these words and other people don't know any, so it's really up to you as a self-study. But the recommended thing from me, the message is to go to the glossary and to the flashcards and read through your suggested reading, and it's things that you're not sure about, that's where you need to look up definitions. Over to you, Chris.
This was great, John. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, John.
Hey guys, I just wanted to chime in here real quick. I know I've kind of been kind of off to the side today. Usually I'm helping to lead the group. I have some things going on. John, you did an awesome job today. Thank you very much. I'm going to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion. I have a event coming up this evening on Michigan for professional photographers of Michigan. I put the link in the Facebook or to the Facebook event in the chat if you want to attend. It's at 6:30 this evening Eastern time, and there is no charge. It's headshots with me, and I'm going to be talking specifically about the headshot business and how to do headshots in a very small area. If you look at the studio behind me, this is what I use, and it's a 9x16 area, and you take out about 2 or 3 feet of desk space behind the camera, and that's what I'm left with. So I'm going to be talking specifically how to overcome smaller areas, and then also my headshot sessions. So, and then I will get into some lighting, some things that will be on the CPP test, so it's not entirely just about me. It's also about things that you will be able to use for your CPP.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
I could have promoted you, Chris. I could have.
That's okay, Deb. I know you could have. You'll be there, right?
Yes.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you very much.
Well, Deb, you have on there exam 623. Is that online?
Yes, I had to switch it. It was going to be May 23rd, but I have a big event on that day, so I'm sorry, it was going to be May 26th, I believe, that Wednesday. But anyway, I have something else coming up, so I had to push it out. But the lady did it for me to June 23rd, but I'm going to probably do it sooner than June 23rd.
So this is online?
Yes.
Okay. And so
I'm going to be having in-person testing in Michigan towards the end of July.
But otherwise, do you have to have I don't have a liaison yet, but so you have to have a liaison.
You do not have to have a liaison, although your liaison will help you very much in trying to get things scheduled. You schedule your test online through PPA and ProctorU, or if it's an in-person test, the liaison will schedule their testing, and it has to be done 60 days in advance of when your test is going to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I am age 70, and I'm doing this just for my own knowledge. I'm slowing down a lot because of age and health issues. But yeah, I've had a camera in my hand since age 16. So this is great. I was a custom color printer at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, which was voted by PPA Best Lab in North America in 1971.
Well, congratulations and welcome, Ken. It doesn't matter what age, keep on learning. I have to have something to add to that. So the CPP committee of PPA meets every now and then, and the next set of meetings is going to be to redo the test and update it, because there's new technology all the time. And just like you were saying, mirrorless is the future for camera manufacturers. The exam also needs to be kept up to date with questions that are pertinent to today's technology. And I mean, the London Upton book has a lot on film, and that's now a niche market. It's predominantly digital. So keeping up to date with information like you're doing is great, and there's always more to learn. So kudos to you.
Yeah.
Yes, Ken, I learned a lot from you today, so I really enjoyed you being here today.
So I have a request, which it's still hard actually. So I run my local affiliate of PPSCV, the program. I'm the vice president there, and getting people interested in events is much better if other people say these events are useful. So my request to you, and it's nothing about me, but if you think that these CPP Study Break meetings are useful to you and they help you on your journey, put comments in the Facebook feed so that other people, when they're looking, can think twice about joining in, whereas they might think, oh, it's talking heads, it's a waste of time. So we want them to know that we're a resource, and it's quite likely that we can help. So they're welcome. So please,
Yeah, if you have any clout at all, my health issues are such that I can't attend Imaging USA live. I would like to do it again this year like I did in January, virtual. Have a virtual option for people like me where if they can't attend, you can do it virtual.
So that's an interesting thing about meetings in general going forwards, because I believe that we're going to see a lot more hybrid meetings which support both in-person and virtual attendance. So I'm with you. I like the in-person meetings at Imaging USA because I get to meet people and network, and it's a big part of the experience. But being able to go remotely when you can't afford or don't want to fly or whatever else is also great. And I just have to disappoint you by saying I don't have any clout.
I agree that in person is always the best because you can't handle and heft the new equipment. You can't rub shoulders with people that are doing the edge things, the latest and greatest.
That's right. I got to meet Julianne Cost a couple of times, so that's like rock star for me. So.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of
Catherine, where are you from, Catherine? Are you
I
in
live in
Michigan?
Florida right now. I moved
Florida.
from Michigan to Florida in summer of 2019.
Okay.
Is that an upgrade?
They say it's heaven's waiting room, so.
I am in the Spokane, Washington area.
Okay.
Where are you, Deb?
I'm in Michigan.
Okay.
In Detroit.
So Kenneth, we are close because I'm in Oregon.
I was down by Toledo, Deb.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hour away from Detroit.
Yeah, yeah.
A defector is what she is.
It's good to get worldwide experience. I think the further west I go, from London to New York to Pittsburgh to California, the further west I go, I like it. So who knows, next stop, Hawaii, or who knows. Okay, anyway, I'll call the meeting to an end officially.
Okay.
And if you want to stay in chat, that's great.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
See you this evening, Chris.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.